There we go. Okay. Now we're connected. The bandwidth of the hotel is a little bit sketchy, but we're working with it as best we can. Had this occurred, had someone actually been shot by the Secret Service, it would have been legal, just like when Ashley Babbitt was shot. It would have been justified use of force because they would have been trying to protect the office of the president. But it also would have been the end of the republic. The enemy would have a final and decisive victory. So, fortunately, the Chinese were not able to get this going. They weren't able to make this happen. Let's make sure that everything is still going here. Just hold on one second. I'm just trying to work with the OBS. Just give me a chance to reboot it here. And we'll get it back up and going. There we go. So there we go. Everybody's connected. The issue is that the hotel just has very poor bandwidth. So now we're back. I just want to be sure that everybody's getting all of this, because had the Chinese been successful in getting Americans shot by Secret Service back in May of 2020, it would have been the end of the republic. I don't think it was a good day when Ashley Babbitt was shot. When she was assassinated by Capitol Police, it was a bad day for everyone. As Dwayne Kales has said ad nauseum, that's why Trump went to the bunker that night. The Secret Service protects the president and the executive office, not the building. So the president was safe, and that way deadly force didn't have to be used. Let's see here. Oh, there's one more thing. You remember how the acting Secretary of Defense, Chris Miller, said he needed to look the Northcom commander in the eye? You remember him saying that? This was a few days before President Trump left office. Here's the transcript. I'll quote. This is what he said. I need to look the commander in the eye because, the president, Secretary of Defense, me, I, whatever the correct English is, you guys can clean that up. You should have paid more attention in high school. My wife would be ashamed of me not knowing the proper preposition. And then General Van Herk. So, I said it before, you can have the VTCs all day long, but you want to I want to look the guy in the eye and get a sense for his soul. And I think he probably needed to do that for me as well. So, who is General Glenn D. Van Herk? Turns out he is a 4-star Air Force general, and his office biography is like this. He is the commander, United States Northern Command and North American Aerospace Defense Command. U.S. Northcom conducts homeland defense, civil support, and security cooperation to defend and secure the United States and its interests. Let's see. Secretary of Defense Chris Miller, who had just conducted some of the most complex military operations in our nation's history, wanted to meet face to face with the exact general you'd need to devote the military chain of command and make sure Brandon has adult supervision. Now, let's look a little closer. Remember, he said, I needed to look the commander in the eye because, the president, Secretary of Defense, me, and then General Van Herk. Right? I said that. President Trump was at that meeting as well, if you look at that transcript closely. But the press wants everyone to believe they just complained about the cost of the F-35. Yeah, whatever. Now, we've talked about President Trump no longer being the president in office. Somebody said to me the other day, well, President Trump's no longer in power. I said, actually, that's not true. President Trump is no longer in the White House, but he is definitely not out of power. There wasn't much evidence for a government in exile when we first started talking about this. Comfortably numb. That's a very good point. You bring it up. But some of the statements by President Trump, evidence of a successful color revolution, and if you look into the past, see what other governments did when they were faced with invasion. And that's when Patel Patriot found the Commonwealth Act number 671, and what the government of the Philippines did when they were invaded by the Empire of Japan. Just a little bit of history, because this is the program where the past meets the future. Forming a government in exile was a reasonable response by a duly elected government to protect itself in dire circumstances, right? You don't want to just say that you're the government in power, because they'll come and find you and they will shoot you in a ditch. However, since December of last year, the idea of a government in exile is something that everybody now believes, okay? The behavior of President Trump makes sense. Unlike, devolution, where you're talking about a decentralization of the military to keep it from being a target, but an organization of the military in a fashion to ensure continuity of government. So a coup can't fully take place, because a coup, in order to fully take place, you have to have full command of the military. You have to have them in the room, get them on their knees, and make them commit to loyalty to the new regime. That hasn't happened, because the military has been decentralized. It's been sent out on operations. I'm sorry, that's the wrong word. On exercises. It has kept it out of that meeting. So the president has not been able to become the commander in chief. That's basically devolution. Trying to make sure that the government that was set up under President Trump has continuity through this speed bump we call the Biden presidency. So here's the evidence for a government in exile. All right. And it's sort of like, no, we don't have documents to prove it, but we do have evidence. We can observe the effects of a government in exile. Mark Meadows told the press on July 30th, 2021, that Trump had a meeting with his cabinet. Remember, this is 2021. Election was in 2020. And the press picked up on that, and they went ballistic. Their hair was on fire. They picked up on what Meadows was saying, only to have their confirmation bias kick in and dismiss the statement as total nonsense. But did the government in exile of the Philippines do the same thing? The answer is yes, they did. President Manuel Quezon had regular cabinet meetings with the cabinet members who fled the Philippines with him. So President Trump has been meeting with his cabinet members at Mar-a-Lago. Number two, Mike Pompeo made a statement about two State Departments. Two State Departments. On November 10th, 2020, this is after the election, Mike Pompeo had a press conference where a member of the press asked the secretary if a delay in meeting with the Biden administration officials would cause a problem with the State Department. Intentionally or unintentionally, Mike Pompeo dropped a reference to two State Departments in his statement to the press. Yes, he did. Here's exactly what he said. I will quote this part. The world should have every confidence that the transition necessary, that the State Department is functional today, is successful today, and will be successful with the president who is sworn in on January 20th. A minute after noon will also be successful. Did you catch the subtle reference to two different State Departments? Will be successful, will also be successful. Taken alone, the statement means very little. Just a grammatical error in saying one State Department will be ready. However, there's evidence that there are two State Departments serving the interests of we the people. It's under Secretary Blinken that executes the foreign policy of the Brandon administration. The second State Department can be seen with former Trump officials going around the world and meeting with foreign officials and nations. You don't believe me? Here's the list. It happened this week. We saw statements from these very individuals this week about what's going on in Ukraine. Rick Grenell is in the Balkans as a special envoy. He made a statement today. He's there to help Bosnia and Serbia reach a peace agreement. And Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, is in Taiwan accepting an award and meeting with officials. You getting the picture now? Jared Kushner, former special assistant to the president, guess where he went? He went to Saudi Arabia. He went to the United Arab Emirates back in January and February, just a couple of months ago. Steve Mnuchin, the former Secretary of the Treasury, he went to Saudi Arabia in October of 2021. Mike Pence, former VP, he met with the president of Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu. What's subtle but critically important? The foreign officials aren't just meeting, they're signing agreements. And they're agreeing to these meetings. There is official business being discussed. There are treaties being signed at these meetings. Earth Explorers, that's foreign recognition of the government in exile. You understand what I'm saying? They didn't throw them out. They didn't say, you have no authority to negotiate this agreement. They did negotiate the agreement. Rick Grenell was successful. Vice President Pence was successful. Right now, today, the middle of March 2022, we have the following countries covertly recognizing the Trump government in exile. You want to know who they are? Oh, they're not obscure. No, not at all. Serbia, Bosnia, Taiwan, Israel. And we also have three other countries that overtly recognize the Trump government in exile. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and this one is very important. It's very important for today's news and what we're going to talk about in the second hour. Russia. Yes, absolutely, Russia. Russia is thoroughly convinced that Virtual Joe is president of nothing. He's president of nothing. Have they actually come out and said that they support the government in exile? No. And you're not going to get such a declaration. But regarding the Ukraine situation, the UAE and Saudi Arabia refused to meet with the Biden administration. You saw that, didn't you? Biden called the meeting and they said, no, we don't think so. We're not going to meet with you. So here's the strongest piece of evidence for the government in exile you're ever going to see. Because these countries do recognize President Trump. So, and here's a pretty odd thing about the Taiwan trip. Right before Pompeo arrived in Taiwan, Biden also sent a team. Okay, he sent a team ahead of Pompeo. And the team was led by Admiral Mike Mullen, who's a former JCOS chief. And he'll be joined by former Deputy National Security Advisor Megan O'Sullivan, former Undersecretary of Defense Michelle Flourney, Mike Green, and Evan Medeiros, both of which were senior directors for Asia on the National Security Council. Now, here's what's very strange about this. Listen very closely. Isn't Taiwan supposed to be this new conflict zone, right? China's like right on the verge of just pouncing on Taiwan and absorbing it like they did Hong Kong. Haven't we heard that, China's going to invade Taiwan and it's not going to last, 24 hours. China's so big and Taiwan's so small. They're going to do the same thing with Taiwan that Russia's done with Ukraine, right? You've been hearing that every day. Sean Hannity's been talking about it. Mark Levin's been talking about it. Ducey's been talking about it. Fox News. He gets sick of hearing it. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back after this. Don't go away. More X Squared Radio right after this.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message. This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs, government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Are you interested in paranormal, murder mystery, real natural law? Do you enjoy interviews with amazing guests? Then join Crip Rick every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Revolution Radio. Studio A, freedomslips.com. Crip Rick's Ivan Thinking. Welcome to the Crypt.
Join me at Revolution Radio, Studio B, at 11 a.m. on Saturday for free association, when we take a look at philosophy, spirituality, psychology, social issues, and geopolitics. It's every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern on Studio B at freedomslips.com.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven, Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
That's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Galactic Interstellar Council on Revolution Radio Studio A, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Join us as we traverse the starseed paradigm, as expressed in the time-space continuum that we know as the divine expression of love and light, integrating this conscious unity into the galactic paradigm. So welcome all, both terrestrial beings and galactic beings as one. So be it. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at BritishLeft.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of this program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. All right, thanks for listening while we take that short break here at Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
All right, I wanted to talk a little bit about Taiwan because it's a conflict zone. Why this is so anomalous and so noteworthy that Pompeo and his team went there. But right before he went there, Biden's team went there. And now this is Brandon's team, right? And you'll note that the support staff to Admiral Mullen, they're all former national security people from Bush and Obama administrations. So just so you know who these people are, this is Obama reloaded. Admiral Mullen made a name for himself in 2020 when he objected to Trump using force against Antifa and what we now know to be the Chinese agents. He wanted to use force against them, and this is the military guy that came out and said no. So he considered them protesters, not enemy combatants. Remember, the protest happened May 30th, 2020. This is way before the election. It happened in front of the White House. Trump decided to go into the bunker instead of the Secret Service acting on his behalf and in attacking them. So here's what needs to be pointed out. All the members of this diplomatic team to this international hotspot of Taiwan are former government officials. You got that? That's clear. We understand that. So let me ask you this question. Why isn't Anthony Blinken going? I mean, isn't the sovereignty of Taiwan an important issue in the Pacific? Right? Isn't this the reason? The most important person who is actually going there is Mike Pompeo, right? Everyone else are former government officials. Pompeo met with Taiwan's foreign minister. And now here's what I think. Here's what many people think. Taiwan is meeting the Secretary of State of the government in exile. They're not meeting with the Secretary of State of the Brandon administration because he didn't go. He didn't go. Brandon sent Obama's old staff, okay? Did not send the Secretary of State. Mike Pompeo went. Taiwan is broadcasting to the whole world, if they just open their eyes and see that their national security is on the line, and they don't give a rat's ass about meeting with Virtual Joe and his gang of criminals. They put their faith and their trust in the government in exile of the United States, not with Virtual Joe and his gang of criminals. That's the point to take away from this. Now, General Mike Flynn, who I have met in person a couple of times, Here's what he said. Let's see here. Two governments, one elected, one selected. This is one of the strongest examples of a government in exile you're ever going to get. Who is part of the government in exile? Well, the Federal Mission Resilience Executive Committee. On this list, we have the following individuals. Listen very closely. This is the government in exile. You see if you agree with me. Chris Miller, Secretary of Defense. Chad Wolf, Secretary of Homeland Security. John Ratcliffe, Director of National Intelligence. Robert O'Brien, National Security Advisor. Tony Ornato, Assistant to the President, Deputy Chief of Staff. Russell Vaught, Director, OMB. Mark Meadows, Chief of Staff, not named as an individual, but the position of Chief of Staff is the executive position that the other individuals report to when they complete a deliverable as part of this FMREO, this executive order that we're talking about tonight. So at a bare minimum, these individuals are involved in the government in exile, but there are more obvious people that are involved as well. Right? You're going to get this right off. Donald Trump, President. Mike Pence, Vice President. Dan Scavino, Social Media Director. Rick Grinnell, Special Envoy, Ambassador. Mike Pompeo, Foreign Minister. Jared Kushner, Special Envoy, Ambassador. Mark Meadows, Prime Minister. Who is in the devolved chain of command in the military? How about the civilian lead, Chris Miller? Another civilian lead, Kash Patel. Another civilian lead, Ezra Cohen Watnick. A commander, General Glenn Van Herk. The USSOF. This comes from Miller's involvement. USSOF were broken out of the normal chain of command and made independent. It's one of the official acts Miller did as Secretary of Defense. And there are others. Can't mention them at this time. These individuals are here because they can be pointed to a connection between them and the devolved chain of command, this continuity of government. So the government that was set up in 2016 doesn't fall apart. That's a good point, Chad. I would call them white hats, but the white hats are kind of like anons. White hats are like non-governmental people that work on behalf of the mission. Okay, a lot of us wear black hats because we look good in black, but we do white things. White hats are in control, but officially not as a mob. They are officially in control. So in order to answer this question, how does devolution and government exile mesh together to protect the nation? We got to step back to January 20th, 2017. This is when the original inauguration took place. You remember when President Trump basically announced the war. He said this is not the peaceful transition of power from one party to another. This is the transfer of power from Washington, D.C. back to you, the American people. That was the declaration of war. That was the war that started a few days later when all the pink hats showed up in Washington and trashed the place. And has been going on ever since. So when President Trump came into office, he had a vision for transforming the federal government from an entity that served itself at the expense of the citizen to an entity that served the citizen first. He encountered individuals within the federal civil service who were not at all interested in helping Trump make his vision a reality. A more accurate statement is that these individuals were downright hostile to what Trump wanted to do. Immediately, the establishment assigned minders, General Mattis, John Bolton, General McMaster, Kelly. Their job was to make sure that the status quo wasn't upset too much. Well, it didn't work out too well, did it? In theory, the swamp intended to frustrate policy implantations, but actively thwarting Trump at every turn. Let me fix that in my notes here. Let's see here. There we go. The vast civil service ranks could also be relied upon to slow roll policy, which they certainly did, Paul Ryan and others. And in my opinion, they were insubordinate in doing so, and they should have been fired. So it kind of brings us to this contradiction. The swamp that Virtual Joe and his gang of criminals love, like pigs like slop, they're back in the White House, and Orange Man Bad is gone. So they have their way. They have everything they want, right? They have the swamp. It's all stinking and festering, and everybody's grabbing for everything that they can get. They're having as much sex, drugs, and rock and roll, everything that they want. So I got to ask you the question, how come they can't get anything done? They got everything in their control. They have all the money they ever wanted, trillions of dollars. Why can't they get anything done? So let me share with you something out of The Art of War. Let's go back to June 25th, 1940. Okay? France has fallen to the Wehrmacht as Hitler's armies march across Europe. That was easy peasy, right? The Blitzkrieg was unstoppable in 1940. Winston Churchill created the Special Operations Executive, and these were commandos that both trained resistance forces and carried out sabotage missions in occupied Europe. Were they a huge army marching down the streets with guns? No, they were secret. And there was another secret group inside the SOE. And the group would be a constellation of commando units that would stay behind in Britain in the event that the island nation was invaded and conquered by Nazi Germany. Arms caches were constructed across the country, and they were stocked. Now, had the Nazis successfully invaded Britain, and they bombed the stuffings out of it, but they never invaded Britain. Crazy, isn't it? 60 miles. They could have invaded easily. These troops stayed behind. And they would have stayed behind in the case of an invasion, and they would have given the Nazi troops one hell of a rough time from within. Now, fortunately, the Royal Air Force and Hitler's catastrophic military expedition into the Soviet Union made Hitler give up his plans to invade Britain and stay behind troops who were never needed. But Trump never trusted the bureaucratic arm of the federal government or the military. So my question, of course, he's not going to trust Lois Lerner, right? He's not going to trust a Colonel Vindman, he's not going to carry them to faithfully carry out his vision, right? So another strategy had to be employed that would accomplish the same mission of the stay behind SOE troops in Britain in the event that the administration was overrun, which it was. So Trump implemented a three-pronged strategy. One that kept his opinions open in the event his options open in the event the political establishment tried to cheat. Number one, Trump issued a ton of executive orders, right, and executive memorandums that were tied to the COVID-19 national state of emergency. So long as that emergency existed, so the PEADS would frustrate the enemy administration. That emergency is in place. Virtual Joe is not going to let go of it, just like um, the governors won't let loose of their emergency powers. They like them too much. And as long as they hold on to the emergency powers, they can't get anything done because it also empowers the forces that are working to keep continuity of government in place. So, number two, what we call in the art of war, Judas goats. Judas goats. And a Judas goat is this. A Judas goat is a trained goat that's used in general animal herding. The Judas goat is trained to associate with sheep or cattle, leading them to a specific destination. They use them in stockyards. In a stockyard, a Judas goat will lead sheep to the slaughter while its own life is spared. That's what a Judas goat does because, sheep will follow goats. Goats are smarter than sheep and they can be trained. So Trump has placed these people into the Democrat Party, not during his administration only, but over decades. Over decades. He's paid them, got them in, made them look and sound and smell just like Democrats. But what is their mission? What is their mission? Their mission is to lure the Democratic Party to expose itself to the American people for what it truly is. The original Roosevelt fascist organization hell-bent on dominating every facet of American life, right? And number two, to maintain the status quo. They do this by making statements or authoring legislation that appears nuts to us, but it brings out the fascist wackos on the left. Let me give you a case in point. Look at the woman, that is, if she could be defined as a woman. I don't know, she has a hard time defining women. Look at the woman that's being considered for the Supreme Court right now. Talk about whacked. Talk about crazy. I mean, never in 100 years would a man or a woman with these ideologies be considered for the Supreme Court. A pedophile, a person who is friendly toward people who victimize children and who traffic in underage children. Are you kidding me? That is so offensive to everyone. Nobody would consider that. So why is the Democrat Party wasting everyone's time by having this woman testify before the Senate? Because it is a waste of time. That's why. Because it is a waste of time. They have made themselves look so foolish, so stupid, so idiotic, and yet they believe in it. They're all in on it. They're all invested in it. Yeah, well, that's exactly right, Corbin. She doesn't even know what a woman is. Maybe she does. Maybe she does. But when they asked her for the definition of a woman, she could not or would not do it. She said, well, I'm not a biologist. What do you mean you're not a biologist? You can't describe what a breathing human being is? You don't need to be on the court. That's about as basic as it gets, right? It's as basic as it gets. Maybe she should describe what the plus is. The plus, LGBTQ plus. We know what the plus is. The plus is M. M is the next letter. And M means minor attracted. It means that an adult is attracted to a child in a sexual way. And that is normal. That is to not be discriminated against. That's specifically why this Supreme Court nominee must never, ever be confirmed. I don't know about setup for a transhumanism, but it's a setup for open pedophilia from top to bottom and make it the Supreme Court, make it legal through their decision-making process, just like they made abortion legal. So the point is that the Judas goats, they suck up all the oxygen in the room. They intentionally propose policy and nominees that can't pass, never in 100 years, even with Democrat control of the legislature. The precious political capital is all spent, and they don't gain anything. So they passed a budget. Big deal. That budget can be unspent just as easily it can be spent. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They're going to be out of power and unable to manage that budget in 7 months. They're going to be gone because they're wasting all their energy on it. The status quo is maintained, and Trump is succeeding where his deep state minders failed. So, number 3 is, of course, the stay behind troops. Over 4 years, Trump would have been able to insert and promote select people within the federal civil service ranks. These are people that cannot be fired. These are career politicians now, career bureaucrats. In the event that Trump's administration was overrun by cheating, which it was, these people would be placed to sabotage the policy goals of the incoming administration. These stay-behind troops would have been quietly inserted and promoted to positions within the Civil Service Corps in order to inflict the maximum amount of damage to the incoming enemy administration. Remember, the list of the failures of this administration is way longer than its successes. Way longer. So, let's see. I don't want to spend any time listing these failures because we don't have enough time. What I want to talk about is how this has led us to this point where we are being fed so much false information about what's going on in Ukraine. And I because I'm in a hotel, I can't control the media like I can at home. I turn the TV on, and naturally, there's no basketball games on, so I tuned to Fox News this morning as I was getting ready. I could not believe my ears. I could not believe my ears. How wrong, how totally opposite, how totally fake all the news was about what's going on in Ukraine. It was like a parallel universe. That's how opposite it was of what reality is. So, amid the shock and horror of Russia's Ukraine operation, many have sought to blame everything solely on Vladimir Putin. As international audiences try to make sense of the unthinkable scenes currently unfolding in the heart of Europe, it is convenient to believe that Putin has simply lost his mind. Sean Hannity saying it, Mark Levin's saying it, Fox News is saying it. I'm just hearing it. And there's something reassuring about the idea that what's going on in Ukraine is basically all down to the criminal insanity of one man. However, Vlad man bad is a comforting myth that disguises a very dark reality. What is going on in Ukraine needs to be made clear to everybody. What the pan-European army has been doing for a couple of decades or more is building up its multinational forces in not only troop manpower, but artillery, missiles, tanks, and other equipment that is designed to invade and conquer other countries in order to change regimes. Have they done it before? Yes, they have done it before, and they plan on doing it again. So each step that they took closer and closer to Ukraine, of course, Vladimir Putin could see those steps. And it's not as though he suddenly became, anti-European. He's been saying this for 20 years. The entire time that he's been president, of Russia. He has been telling Europe, we are not the Soviet Union, and you're not going to attack our country and take us over. You're not going to attack the Russian people and destroy them. So that's why in 2014, in the mayhem that was aimed at Ukraine by Johns, McCain, and Kerry, Russia went in and saved Ukraine. Ukraine was the weakest link in the system. Ukraine had this enormous natural gas deposit that they could not develop because they couldn't get the loans to install the equipment. And the loans that were offered to them were from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, and that's basically a debt trap. They put you in untenable debt, and then when you can't pay it back, they come and repossess your country. They've used it a lot. All over Europe, they've used it. They used it in Italy. They used it in Greece. They used it in Spain. They were trying to use it in Crimea. And Putin said, you're not coming to Crimea. You're not going to put your planes there. You're not going to put your tanks there. You're not going to put your oil wells there. Those are Russian people, and those are Russian assets. And so Crimeans voted almost unanimously, way over 90%, to become annexed to Russia. Not a shot was fired. There was no invasion. There was no force used at all. But that they weren't satisfied with. They sent troops, mercenaries, guns, mortars, machine guns, 20-millimeter cannons into the Donbass region. And they fortified a group called the Avos. The Avos are Nazis. These are World War II Nazis. And these Nazis were gaining in strength, and they were attacking the Ukrainian people, wearing Ukrainian uniforms, but with the SS on the side, or the wolf's hook, or the actual swastika. And they were attacking Ukrainians, where Ukrainians began fighting back. And a plea for help went out, and soldiers from all over the world, including the United States, came to help the Ukrainian army fight the Nazis. Well, actually today, March 23rd, that's today, that Nazi force that was building up in Donbass had reached critical mass. Today, it was supposed to invade Crimea. March 23rd, today, they were supposed to invade Crimea and take it back over, seize it for the European army. That's part of the pan-European army operating inside of Ukraine. Putin's spies picked this up and said, we're not going to allow that. We're not going to allow NATO forces to enter Crimea. They'll only be 7 minutes from Moscow, and they control the warm water port in the Black Sea. We're not going to do that. Plus, they would seize all the oil and gas property. So you think that I just talk about this. You think that maybe just a few of us out here in the mainstream news talk about this, that the fake stream news has their narrative, and the mainstream news, which is us, because most of the people are with us, we have more followers, we have more patriots that listen to what we say and believe what we say because it's true than the fake stream news does, even though they get all the advertising dollars. We don't care about that. So, believe it or not, the same thing is true in Russia. Recent polling data provides the clearest indication of Russian popular support for what's going on in Ukraine. In the days following the February 24 incursion, when Russian troops went in to seize these biolabs in Ukraine very strategically, make sure that the nuclear power plants were not used as a false flag accident. They secured those and surround and begin denazifying the area where the Nazi troops have been killing Ukrainian citizens on a regular basis just for fun. Putin's personal approval rating actually rose higher than it's been in many years. Many years. The Russian people are not against what President Putin is doing. They are supportive of it because they knew what NATO was doing. In fact, they were upset that he took so long doing it because they were afraid They knew that the cruise missiles that were in Poland and Romania were aimed at them. And they were afraid because this pan-European army has already shown a propensity for this, and they've already stated openly that their goal is regime change in Russia. They're still talking about it. They were talking about it this morning on Fox News. Lindsey Graham was talking about somebody assassinating Vladimir Putin just today, again today. That's called regime change, Earth Explorers. So several polling agencies recorded not a small increase, 7%, a 7% increase of popularity. You know what Virtual Joe's approval rating is in the United States, right? It's hovering around 37%. Do you know what Vladimir Putin's approval rating in Russia is today? 71%. I ask you, have we ever had a president with 71% approval rating in this country? Well, the answer is yes, we have. During the first Gulf War, President George Herbert Walker Bush, had a rating that high. What is that? 78? What does that mean? 78. All right. So, anyway, a lot of these polls are independent. I'm not buying that they're Kremlin linked. I'm not buying that. A lot of these are independent because they want to find that the Russian people are pissed off at Putin and want him out. But that's not what they found. They found the exact opposite. In fact, the nationwide Russian survey was conducted between February 28th and March 3rd, when the reality of the war was already apparent. It found that around 58% of Russians approved, this is before it happened even, approved of the invasion of Ukraine, while just 23% opposed it. 23%. Yes, that's right, Chad. Putin loves the Russian people, and by and large, the Russian people love him. Why? Because he is not a globalist. He is not going to sell them out to the Global Syndicate. Ordinary Russians have been queuing up to publicly endorse this denazification of Ukraine. The Z branding used by the Russian troops, you've seen the Z on the equipment, right? It's becoming increasingly ubiquitous across the country, everywhere, not just on military equipment. The Z is showing up everywhere as a shorthand symbol of support. Flags, t-shirts, hats, car windows. It's rapidly expanding. The list of public figures and professional collectives that have released statements backing what's going on in Ukraine. For example, the heads of 250 Russian universities. Yeah, universities, those are usually really liberal. 250 universities published an official address by the Union of Russian Rectors on March 4th, justifying the war and calling on Russians to rally around Putin. Let's see. As the Russian crisis in Eastern Europe heats up, Ukraine Alert Daily delivers the best Atlantic Council expert insight. If you can access it, it's difficult to find, but you can get to it. It puts out good information. What they found, and this is not in Russia now, this is actually in Ukraine, talking to Ukrainians. Ukrainian reporters going into the streets of Ukraine, interviewing Ukrainians, okay? And they found that the opposition to Putin coming into Ukraine and fighting against the Avos, or the Azov, it's been underwhelming. They expected to find revolt. They expected to find people that were mad, that wanted Putin to leave, that wanted the Russians out. That is not true. Protests have been taking place in a number of cities across Russia, but these efforts have attracted relatively tiny crowds, very small, and they've failed to gain momentum. Let me tell you, that really pisses Victoria Nuland off. because Victoria Nuland hates the Russians with a passion. And keep in mind, she's trying to protect those 30 biolabs that she has operating in that country. Those biolabs are probably what created COVID-19. Yeah, those biolabs probably were the ones that created COVID-19. That weapon was sent to China to infect New Year's people that were celebrating Chinese New Year's in Wuhan, knowing that those Wuhan individuals would get back on planes and fly all over the world and infect the world. It wasn't as bad as they thought it was going to be. It took the shutdown to really make things bad. But yes, Chad, it did originate in China, but it wasn't made in China. I'm thinking it was probably made in Ukraine. But there's lots worse things being made in Ukraine. So the courage of individual Russian protesters is not in question. It is futile to talk of a significant opposition movement in Russia until we really see anti-war rallies attracting hundreds of thousands. That's not happening. There's no indication it's going to happen. Most Russians seem more concerned by the departure of international consumer brands from their country than like McDonald's, than by the war crimes being committed by their army in neighboring Ukraine. And I question that even. Most of the reporters that are talking to me over there, they are on location, not in Kiev. They are on location. While we're conversing, I can hear artillery in the background. That's how close they are. Okay, we're talking not in a 5-star hotel in Kiev, many, many, many miles from where the action is happening, but right there where it's happening. Okay, right there where it's happening. Their meals now consist of coffee and bread because there are no food in the grocery stores. Okay, that's where they are, right there in the front lines. And I'm telling you, it is the Russians that are preserving the peace. It is the Azov that are shooting at civilians, shooting at buses and cars and trains. It is the Azov. They tied people to trees naked, and they whipped them on video, laughing about it, having fun about it. Civilians. These are not Russians. These are the Azov. These are the Nazis. So you don't see it because the media is not going to play it for you. So the other thing that happened is Russia has refused to send out the fertilizer, and it looks like Ukraine is going to miss this week's plant. This week of March is the week that the Ukrainians plant wheat. It's not being planted. It's not like you can plant wheat in 3 weeks. It has to be planted right now, or it's not going to be harvested correctly, which means about 15% of the world's wheat supply is going to disappear. 15%. And that's just because the Ukrainians are not planting. If the Russians don't send out the fertilizer like they're supposed to, you can consider another 10% of productivity to disappear because wheat doesn't do so well without fertilizer. Yes, Russia is accepting rubles for oil. They are accepting rubles for oil. That is true. And it is mostly from the nations that are hostile to it. Countries that are friendly to Russia can still trade in the normal currencies, but other countries that are hostile to it, openly hostile to it, or are supplying their enemies, they're going to have to pay in rubles. That is true. So that's a good point there. I don't know how to read your name. Cap Superolds? Cap Superolds? Okay. Pick something easier to read. when we're live. So it's beyond tempting to go with the press, or to say that Vladimir Putin's acting on his own, that he's crazy, that he's lost his mind, that he wants to reestablish the USSR. It's easy to listen to that, and I don't know if Sean Hannity's even listening to my program anymore, because you know what? I damn sure is not listening to his program anymore. He's lost it. He has lost it. He has bought into this narrative, and he doesn't have people on the ground like we do. He's not getting the truth. So, and it's not really a war yet, okay? This isn't really a full-blown war. This is more like a police action. Today's, pro-war mood, this really didn't emerge overnight, okay? For centuries, Russia has bitterly opposed Ukraine's struggle for statehood. Instead, Russians have been encouraged to adopt a condescending view of Ukraine as a younger brother in need of discipline and direction. Now, you would think they'd be alone in this, but they're not. Europe has been the same way. Europe never wanted to accept Ukraine. They barely accept Estonia and Latvia. They barely accept Moldova. They don't accept Belarus. And they don't accept Russia. They don't accept the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are like stepchildren. When Viktor Yanukovych was asking for a loan to develop the very resources that we're now fighting over, he went to the World Bank, who seemed to be perfectly willing to make a loan. But one of the terms that President Yanukovych wanted Ukrainian people to be able to cross the border into Europe, right? To shop, to work, to begin to share. And that was absolutely verboten. Ukrainians were fine as long as they're willing to sign on the dotted line and put their country in debt. But the Ukrainian people were not welcome. To take this to another level of desperation, I just mentioned to you on Sunday, but I'll mention it again in case some of you didn't hear it. One of the largest cash industries inside of Ukraine was the selling of babies, farming pregnant women. You heard of this maternity hospital that was supposedly bombed. When your wife gets pregnant, you go to the hospital and you give birth and you take your baby home, right? That's not what this was. The maternity hospital is a place where pregnant women go to be paid for their infant. The average price is $15,000. So a Ukrainian woman becomes pregnant. She goes to the maternity hospital, gives birth to a healthy baby, is paid $15,000, and she goes home to get pregnant again. It's fetal farming. We do it worse in this country. We chop them to bits and use them to make, drugs and cosmetics. But there, they actually sell the children. So ask yourself, and I don't really know the answer. If I did know the answer, I don't even want to think about it. Who is buying Ukrainian children? 30 biolabs funded with American money from the fascists from Victoria Nuland. Biolabs are buying human babies from Ukrainian mothers, paying them $15,000 per infant, and then those babies are experimented upon with the diseases that they're crafting in these labs. It doesn't get any more vile than that. Let me add another word, put this in perspective for you. It doesn't get any more Nazi than that. Now, does it? Now, do you see why the Russian people, overwhelmingly 71%, support what's going on in Ukraine? Now do you see why Putin had no choice but to go in and save Crimea from this mess? Over the past 8 years, the Kremlin has skillfully, very adeptly amplified these resentments against the Nazis, openly talked about, openly documented. And since the 2014 seizure of the Crimean government in the Ukrainian government in 2014, and Crimea's declaration of independence and becoming annexed to Russia, it's been more difficult to make it clear to people because all this gets twisted. It's hard to describe some Ukrainians as Nazis and puppets of the West, while other Ukrainians are not Nazis and they're being the victims of the same country. But this is exactly what's happening. And the people that have tried to bring this to the forefront in Ukraine, they have been killed or they have been assassinated. My good friend Russell Bentley has been very faithful in staying there. He's been there 8 years. He's given us excellent information over the years. And now there are others. There's 2 individuals that I listen to. One is right near the shelling. Last night he sent us a video from his closet in a friend's apartment that he's staying in. And he ventures out, but they're looking for him. They're looking for him. So I worry about it. I don't know. He's about my age. I don't know if he's going to get out alive, but he is dedicated to getting us the truth. He's telling us what is truth and what is lies. And what is being blamed on the Russians by the mainstream, by the fake stream media, is a lie. That is actually what the Azovs are doing. Fortunately, the Azovs are being whittled down. The Nazis are being whittled down. Where they were maybe 100,000 strong, now they're down to a small fraction of that. But they're not being invited to surrender. They're going to be room temperature by the end of this month. All right. One thing people need to agree on here by the end of tonight is that Russia explained in no uncertain terms, and we could easily find the documentation, but we only have so much time here, that advancing military hardware in a manner interpreted by Russia to have the intention to attack Russia was not acceptable. Putin and his diplomats in the UN told the Pan-European army to move back away from the Ukrainian border and to withdraw advisors and mercenaries from Ukraine. But they didn't listen. If anything, they sent more money. They sent more weapons. They sent more Middle Eastern mercenaries, Al-Qaeda and ISIS fighters. Not only did the Pan-European army refuse to move back away from the border, they increased the amount of money and weapons and military activities inside Ukraine with mercenary forces, specifically against the Russian people living in Donbass. And we just heard this last week, Jen Psaki say she's going to send grenade launchers, shotguns, pistols, rifles, and plenty of ammunition. To whom? She says we're sending it to farmers so they can defend themselves against the Russians. 2 bad ideas about this, Jen. First, those farmers are going to sell those guns on the black market for money because they need money. And number 2, if they do keep those weapons and they aim them at a Russian soldier, they are going to die. Both of those outcomes is exactly what you want. You want Ukrainian farmers to die at the hands of Russian guns, and you want the guns to end up in criminal hands in Ukraine so more Ukrainians can die. That's what's going on. So when Russian spies discovered that this force was gearing up to invade Crimea today, March 23rd, Putin had no choice but to step in and remove the Nazi forces from Ukraine. The reason the vast majority of Russian people support this military effort is that the invasion of Crimea was likely to be accompanied with a biowar. They were going to attack Crimea with a bioweapon. The placement of effective offensive weapons in Poland and Romania was the last straw. That was seen by the people living in Moscow as a direct act of war. And it had to stop. It had to be put to a stop. So Putin is doing exactly what his people want him to do. That's a good question. Chris asked me the question. What about all the money being donated to Ukraine? Where is it ending up? Where do you think? Do you think there's a GoFundMe for Ukrainians Are Us? You think they're flying over in a helicopter and raining, that money down onto the streets so that people can go buy groceries and tennis shoes? No, it's going to Zelensky. And Zelensky is an Azov. Zelensky is an Azov. Yes, I know that's Jewish. I know he's Jewish. But remember, the Khazarian Jews were Nazis. All right? They sold out the Jewish people. Yes, Putin has Jewish roots as well. They both lost ancestors to the Nazis. The reason Zelensky is doing what he's doing is for money, because Kolomoisky is a criminal who ripped off a bank that he owned, that he helped manage from the depositors, and he stole reportedly $5.5 billion, $1.5 billion, $1 billion in Costa Rica, $500 million in Miami, at a Ukrainian bank in Miami, is set aside for Zelensky. Zelensky has a $36 million mansion in Miami. So you ask yourself, why is he in Ukraine? Because he's playing a part. Zelensky is playing a part. You need to see who Zelensky was. You need to know that the Ukrainian people, not the Azovs, think he's wonderful because he's able to, play the part so well to the public eye. But the Ukrainian people know that he is just a crackhead, just like Hunter Biden. It's just like if Hunter Biden, instead of Joe Biden, were our president right now. We know his past. We wouldn't respect him at all. Of course, the left would, because he's singing their song. Same thing with Zelensky. I don't think that Zelensky is open for assassination. Nobody cares about him. Nobody cares about him. If they assassinate Zelensky, then you're going to get some real military leaders in there. Just leave him in there. He's a high heel wearing, makeup wearing joke. He's a joke. Nobody gives him any attention at all, except the fake stream news. So did the Azovs hit the Jewish Holocaust site in Ukraine? Unknown. See, a lot of those places that are showing up as bombed now were actually bombed in 2014 through 2017 by the Azovs. Yes, there's a reporter that went back. She was there during the original assault in 2014, and she stayed and then left when Trump was elected. She went back, and guess what she found? All the buildings that were bombed while she was there in 2014 to 2016 are still there laying on the ground. They're still rubble, except now The fake stream news is saying that Russia flattened him, and that's not what happened. What happened was the Azovs flattened him. Yes, Amy, he is an actor and a dancer. Yeah, I hear he looks good in high heels. Yes, ISBE says Biden is a joke. Biden is not a joke. Biden is the real deal. Biden is the real criminal mind. He is the real crime gang. This is what happens to the criminal mind when you get to that age. You're supposed to give up the power, but you don't want to give up the power. So what happens is people with brains write the speeches and you just read them. Okay? Yes, Biden used to be the president of Ukraine. No, I didn't make a slip up. Joe Biden used to be president of Ukraine. There was a puppet in place in Poroshenko, and Poroshenko did what he was told to do by Biden. And if he didn't do it, Joe Biden would withhold the money. You see, that's the way Ukraine worked. It worked that way for decades. And now it's all coming to an end. Yes, by Putin. So think about it. I talked about this on Sunday, but I have a few minutes left here. How much time do I have left? I have no time. All right. We'll see you Sunday. Don't go away. Stay good. Stay faithful. Be good to one another. Look for the good in others and help it to grow a little bit every day. And before long, you will save the planet. Thank you so much, Earth Explorers, for being part of us.